Console, online. HPG connection, online. Educational module, online. All systems, nominal.
Hello, class, and welcome to On the Origin of Battlemechs Podcast, Episode 9. Today we are going to be talking about the Helepolis, a very unique design. Your hosts today are myself, Brent Stewart McKee, and...
I'm Joshua.
I'm Sam.
So the Helepolis is a Terran hegemony design named after a obscure and ancient siege engine. It's slow and lumbering, and it's an artillery piece. The siege engine it's named after, if you wish to have a picture of it in your mind, is those classic siege engines that you see in movies with the box tower that rolls forward up to the wall and ladders come down and the soldiers pile out into it.
Siege towers.
Except much, much bigger, and it had cannons inside it to shoot as it was moving forward. In fact, most notorious one, the legend has it that the steel plate was either melted down and sold, or melted down and used to create the Colossus of Rhodes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, the Heliopolis is definitely slow.
Yes. But it has those reinforced legs, and it is incredibly stable. So that's the trade-off. And we'll understand why soon.
Yeah, so the HEP-1H, or HEP-1H, is a primitive prototype, and like its namesake, it is a siege engine. It's armed with one sniper artillery piece, a medium laser, an SRM-6, and a large laser. Its movement profile is a mere 2-3, or 30 kilometers an hour, and it is literally designed around carrying an artillery piece through any sort of terrain to support battlemech operations.
Many in the brass actually were hesitant on this design because they felt that vehicle-based artillery was more than sufficient for the needs of the battlefield. But despite their reservations, the design excelled in its role.
You gotta think that at this point, the Terran hegemony is the richest, most heavily industrialized nation in the Battletech universe. And they're just, hey, let's crank out a mech. No biggie. But I think history has proven those skeptical generals correct because you don't really have a lot of, at least not a lot of tube artillery mounted on mechs in the centuries going forward.
No, not really. This chassis was specifically built around the artillery piece. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And that is a commitment that I think most designers aren't willing to commit to with the way that warfare evolved and shifted over the centuries.
Yeah, and again, like the Experimental Primitives 1 says, despite the misgivings which it received, the Heliopolis excelled in its intended duties. When providing prolonged long-range fire support or undertaking the task of breaking down the most stubborn of static defenses, the design performed well. Patton said, fixed fortifications are a monument to the folly of man, and you don't need a specialized battle mech to pound something into submission that can't run away from you.
Yep.
So for the sheer cost of it, I love the concept. I love combined arms, but
You can roll your artillery in on tracks. You can fly it in on helicopters if you need to, but there's not a whole lot of point to a walking artillery piece.
Mm-hmm. And the artillery I prefer is aerospace, honestly. Strafing runs. That I think is a better use of resources because you can have that and air superiority.
I think tube and missile artillery like the Arrow, which is the main mech-mounted artillery we see in later periods, is definitely something you need in any proper combined arms force. One, you can never guarantee that you will have air superiority, and then two, bad weather is a thing. Like, you are going to have days, weeks, months where your aircraft may not be able to sortie effectively. It's definitely, with modern real-world technology, it's much less likely, but it's still a factor. So having some sort of reach out and touch capability that can provide long-range support for units regardless of weather is a capability every military needs. I just don't think you need to spend umpteen million C-bills.
Whenever you can just haul in 2 long toms and do the job.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, this guy definitely has some drawbacks because in order to fire his sniper artillery, he has to stop moving, which of course poses an issue for being a sitting duck as a target.
Yeah,
He does have that one medium laser in the SRM-6, so it's not completely defenseless.
And the large laser.
And the large laser.
No, but it's definitely a drawback, especially considering how the tabletop has a focus on mobility.
True.
Yeah, I mean, warfare has always had a emphasis on mobility. I understand that mechs are supposed to be able to move through more varied terrain than vehicles, but again, with artillery, you don't have to get right up to them. You just have to get within 40 kilometers.
Yeah.
Or 30 kilometers, whatever, and then you can start raining down shells. And heck, you can make a 50-ton hover using Battletech technology that's got, I can't remember if it's a thumper or a sniper, that moves like 110 kilometers an hour. You can reposition it, maneuver through open terrain, and it will get close enough to any rough terrain you want it to set down, put those stabilizers in the ground, and then start firing.
Yeah. Well, that is probably why we didn't see this design continue on throughout the ages,
At least until Jihad era.
So the battle value for this guy is going to come in at 1,063 and a point value of 41. It was followed by the HEP-2H, which came out in 2488, and it was used as part of the forces to put down the September Revolt in Geneva. Now, this guy's armament doesn't change a whole lot. In fact, the only real difference is that it adds a LRM-10 to the right torso, and the speed has been upgraded from 3 to 5.
It's gone from 2.3 to 3.5, or 54 kilometers an hour.
And it also adds the double heat sinks, which is quite useful considering the sniper generates 10 heat per round. So in the previous iteration, that was basically all you could do. So this allows a little bit more of a point defense as you are firing.
The 2H is better in every way except this particular way. And it's not so much that having single heat sinks is better, but in reality, you're not going to be performing call for fire actions with your artillery piece and then also engaging somebody up close with your large laser and your SRM-6, right? It's neither or situation. You're either sitting back in relative safety, plotting your firing trajectories and sending heavy metal downrange to assist your teammates, or somebody's up on top of you and you're fighting for your life with that large laser and that SRM-6 and now the LRM-10
and medium laser.
There's going to be a Lance of Helepolis or Helopoli because whenever you're using artillery, you need to project in force.
Double heat sinks is a nice upgrade, but in my opinion, it's kind of wasted on this 2H because you're standing still, you're firing your sniper. You shouldn't need more than 10 heat.
It does allow it to fire all its other weapons effectively because the large laser generates 8, the LRM-10 4, the SRM-6 4, the medium laser 3, so you're looking at 19 heat total.
If you alpha, but so and I get it, but to me it just seems wasted because, and I'm sorry, I'm ragging on this mech. I really do like the concept.
You see the potential and you see it wasted.
Pretty much.
Not even that. It's okay in its designated role, but outside of that, it's useless. And the way warfare went in this universe, it's not a necessary thing. And it's also extremely expensive and hard to manufacture, so...
So here in technical readout 3075 now, where the HEP-2H is shown, it talks about in the deployment section, the hegemony armed forces chose to deploy Helepolis in a defensive role with batteries of 4 mechs, often being permanently assigned to strategic strong points. The whole purpose of battle mechs is an offensive role, getting through difficult terrain, possibly in order to be able to do orbital insertions to create planetary beachheads.
In that regard, it's an extremely useful thing in establishing a beachhead.
And that is where the Helepolis should be used.
But it's being used defensively and in fixed position.
You're putting it in a fort.
You can just put artillery in the fort.
Yeah.
You could put 12 artillery in the fort.
Like, if you want a good Heliopolis, you put arms on it so it can do that thing we talked about in one of the early episodes where, like a parachutist, it orients itself by shifting its body weight. And you drop it out of a dropship with the rest of your invasion force, and now you have integral artillery support for your quote-unquote paratroopers who are dropping onto a hostile planet in order to establish a beachhead for the rest of the invasion force. That's the role this Heliopolis should be performing, not sitting in a fort throwing rounds that any toad sniper could do.
I can even see it in that paratrooper role. You drop it with 2 arms with, same weapon loadout, but for 2 arms, and then you drop the artillery piece in after, slap that on, take the arm off, slap the artillery piece on, and then you have a mobile artillery platform there with you. But
now, Sonny, that sounds like an Omni-Mech.
I really like the idea, you're dropping dropping the artillery piece in kind of the paratrooper leg bag almost.
Pretty much.
And then the Helepolis gets down to the ground. It picks it up with its own arms, and then it just kind of fits it in on its own shoulder, rotates it into the locking position, and it's like, I'm ready to roll. I mean, that's a cool visual image. That's a great role for an artillery-equipped battle mech.
Is it practical? That would be the question.
In the planetary invasion beachhead scenario, it's more practical than airdropping an M777 from a spaceship and hoping it lands right side up so that the infantry dudes landing next to it can open it up and start engaging. But yeah, I mean, there's not a lot more to talk about with this HEP-2H. It's a straight upgrade, no more primitive tech. That's what allows it to go faster. That's what allows it to have the extra LRM-10. That's what improves the, well, actually, it keeps the armor protection the same with a significant weight reduction in the armor. So that's the HEP-2H.
So it was used instrumentally in putting down the September Revolt, and the September Revolt was an incident in the history of the hegemony predating the Star League. What happened was when Lady Deborah died in 2542, she named her son Joseph as her successor, and he intended to continue his mother's work of moving the hegemony into a diplomatic superpower backed by the military, away from a simple military superpower. This caused a bunch of conspiracies to form in the ranks of the military brass as they feared their influence would diminish. A lone gunman split off from them after becoming disgruntled with their lack of action. Marine Captain Henry Green. After he split, he assassinated Joseph, causing him to die on September 26th, 2549, 5 days after the attack. These events kicked off the September Revolt. On September 28th, 2549, Ian Cameron stepped into the power vacuum and proclaimed himself Director General. Bypassing the public confirmation vote, a marked break in tradition. One of the cabals used this as a pretext to seize control of the hegemony's Congress, the palace of the Director General in Geneva, by force of arms. Ian was away when these events happened in Mexico, and when informed, he ordered the city to be sealed with as little violence as possible. He then consolidated the military under him and fenced in as much of the rebels holding Geneva as possible, then ordered the power and the water cut to the rebels. 10 days after this action, the rebel command fractured and began infighting, and Geneva became a battlefield. The Heliopolis was an important part in maintaining the siege and quarantine, and targeting rebel forces as they spilled out.
It's interesting that Geneva gets a lot of fighting in the Battletech universe. There's quite a bit of revolution and rebellion that happens on the streets of Geneva in the Dark Ages, and apparently that's just tradition for Geneva in the Battletech universe going by this incident.
So the battle value for the 2H is 1369, and the point value is 45. After that, we have the HEP-3H that comes out in 2625.
Yeah, so 140-ish years later.
Give or take.
And I mean, again, the Heliopolis, for all that I've been hating on it, it is a design that basically knows what it wants to do, and it does that, albeit in a mediocre fashion. So the HEP-3H, it's a simple upgrade. The large laser is upgraded to the new ER large laser.
Yep.
That one is BV 1380, PV 46. Sam, can you guess when the HEP-4H debuted?
I'm going to guess it was during the Jihad.
Winner, winner, chicken dinner.
Yep, 3074 to be precise, by VEST, Finding, Engineering, and Salvage Team. Their sidebar here, VEST is a company on Solaris 7, and they're one of the little cooler aspects in the Battletech universe, in my opinion.
I think a good analogy for them would be the Bulldog Recovery in the Marvel universe, if I'm remembering correctly. You know, the people who go out and salvage stuff and repurpose the superheroes or supervillains downed tech into their own armaments.
Yeah, or even in the real world, those kind of custom shops that will take a major manufacturer's design and convert it up into some cool custom rig. They have a handful of designs. A lot of them are cutting edge. Solaris 7 sees a lot of cutting edge technology come through it due to
It's a
the
good test bed.
test beds in the arenas. And VEST has the kind of like that Bowie with that orbital repair station. VEST is a repair salvage company, so they converted that repair and salvage capability into a limited production line. Mostly kind of one-offs or limited runs, but on occasion their designs have been popular enough enough that large companies like Defiance on Hesperus have bought the rights and begun mass producing Vest designs. Now, back to your regularly scheduled HEP programming.
That's a phrase.
Yeah, it is.
So yeah, VST's Jihad variant keeps the ER large laser from the HEP 3H, but is built on an endosteel chassis and uses a light fusion engine, bumping speed up to 64 kilometers an hour, so 4.6. So this Heliopolis can actually move. It's twice as fast as the original, and unfortunately, because of this size constraints, due to the light engine expanding into the side torsos, and then the sheer size of the sniper artillery piece, the LRM-10 had to be split into two LRM-5s and rearranged on the mech.
So it's got a battle value of 1366 and a point value of 45.
The Vest variant basically produced the HEP 4H as a one-off production run for Thor's Hammers, a mercenary company that tends to specialize in artillery support. And it actually, this uprated, faster model, performed pretty well against the Jade Falcons. It's interesting looking at the service history of the 2H and the 3H versus the 4H, and the way they were employed. Because again, that 2H and 3H, you're reading in the TRO that the hegemony, even during the periphery uprising right before the Amaris coup, they basically just parked these things in rear areas, supply depots, forts, and tried to use them to blunt raiders and rebels, and they were ineffective. Some of this deployment, you're concentrating them in rear areas instead of putting them out in fire bases where they can actually support operations. And then the other is it's slow. 54 kilometers an hour is not bad in the real world, but you bump it up to that 64 kilometers an hour, you can actually shoot and scoot. You can evade the counter battery fire coming your way. You can keep up. It's a 75-ton mech. Standard inner sphere speeds for 75-ton mechs is 64 kilometers an hour. So this 4H can actually keep up with the mechs it's supposed to be supporting. And we see that in the Thor's Hammers engagements against the Falcons. It keeps up with the rest of the Hammers and the Tooth of Ymir and provides artillery support where it's needed, when it's needed, from whatever terrain they're operating out of. Because, it's inner sphere versus clans. You've got to find broken terrain that negates the clan range advantage. It's not quite what we were talking about earlier, Sam, with the badass paratrooper drop and putting the cannon on its shoulder, engaging the enemy. But I at least think that this
is a good way to take it.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking more you drop it with 2 arms, and then after you've established your beachhead, take that arm off, and then you put on the artillery piece, and then from there you have artillery projection. But here use it for guerrilla attacks. You can get behind enemy lines with something like this and wreak havoc from a distance, and there's little to nothing that can really do to stop you.
And yeah, clanners hate artillery. So when they start getting shells dropped on them from these Heliopolises, and they send out their elementals and their fast aircraft, and they just run into your forces, and their orders are to break through and kill that artillery, you just kill them, because they're not trying to wreck your face, they're trying to get through you to wreck the artillery's face.
Yeah, no, it definitely serves a niche role, but I think it serves it well. When used effectively, it's devastating.
But again, whenever you can just pull out 4 long toms and set them, what is the range of long toms? It's like 21 sheets away, I think, is the effective range of a long tom. It's not done in short, medium, and long. It's 21 sheets.
Yeah, artillery is usually done in sheets.
Yeah, so whenever you can just have 4 long toms, and
or in this case, 4 snipers.
4 snipers, even just to fill that role at a distance, do you really need a mech with a artillery piece mounted on it?
Probably not in most situations, like we discussed. But against the clans, again, the clans have that huge range advantage. So any inner sphere force worth its salt is going to have to find broken, difficult terrain to enter. And that's in this universe where mechs excel, is inside broken terrain. So the fact that you can bring these Helepolises into terrain where it'd be difficult to move artillery in or out of, otherwise conventional, towed, or even tracked, you're giving yourself an advantage. Again, it's a niche weapon. You've got to be utilizing it in terrain terrain that the more standard equipment can't operate out of. I don't know. I know I was hating on the HEP earlier, but I like this HEP 4.
It's definitely the best of all of them.
And the great thing is, for those of you who are building 350-point Alpha Strike forces to participate in the WNRP 350 format, artillery is now allowed. So you can bring up to 2 units with the ART special. One of those could be the Helepolis.
It's true.
Just make sure you take the 4H.
Yes.
Yes.
Touching on that point value real quick, I'm looking at them, and the 3H versus the 4H. The 3H is 1 PV point more expensive and 14 more, and the only difference, as far as I can tell, is the 3H has the LRM-10 and the 4H has 2 LRM-5s. So that's kind of a big jump for splitting that LRM-10 into 2 LRM-5s.
Well, also the movement upgrade.
Yeah, but that should increase, that mobility should increase the 4H over the 3H.
I see what you're saying. Our sources for the episode today are Sarna, Battletech Battlemech Manual, Master Unit List, Experimental Tech Volume 1, 3075 TRO, 3075 Age of War record sheets, and the Star League sourcebook. Shoutouts to Sarna community and the Wolfnet community. We are supported by our Patreons at patreon.com/on the Origin of Battlemechs. Our social media on Twitter is at Origin of Mechs. We also have a dedicated channel on the Everything Battletech Discord. Feel free to stop by and say hi. If you have any questions, requests for topics, or wish to contact us, our email is ontheoriginofbattlemechs@gmail.com. If you enjoy the show, I encourage you to let your friends know about us and to leave a review. Special thanks to my friend Laura for the intro and outro. Class dismissed. Everybody have a great day.
Peace out, Mech Warriors.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Module complete. System standby. Would you like to load the next module?